Imagine wanting a child and realizing the system wasn't built for you. Not the waiting, not the confusion, not the silence.
They're frustrated. It's not working. They don't know what to do. They see their partner going to the ends of the earth and experiencing this emotional stress and trauma.
What if fertility care didn't begin under fluorescent lights, but at home with clarity, guidance, and control? This is Why Design, where we go behind the scenes of the products shaping our lives and the people brave enough to build them.
I mean, to be honest, that first year was really principally just me trying to figure out, like, how do I grapple with what this idea is? What is the vision? What's the potential? Is it actually feasible?
In this episode, I'm joined by Tess Cosad, CEO and co-founder of Béa Fertility, a company building clinical-grade fertility treatment designed for the real world, outside the clinic and inside your life. But this story isn't about tech, it's about stakes. Because early on, one of their first users called from a hospital bed after an ectopic pregnancy.
She had emergency surgery. She's down a fallopian tube. That impacts your fertility. And yet, here she is saying, I'm going to try again. And I just thought, my goodness, we've really built something here.
That moment changes what product means. It changes what design means. In this episode, we talk about designing in the hardest category there is: regulated medical hardware, patient trust, and the emotional reality no pitch deck can capture. I'm Chris Whyte, and this is Why Design. And Tess, welcome to Why Design. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Chris.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, look, we're going to dive in. So, Tess, you're the CEO and co-founder of Béa Fertility. You're building clinical-grade fertility treatment that people can use at home. You've raised venture funding, launched in the UK, and now you're doing it all again in the US. But before we get into your background, tell me about a moment where everything shifted. When did this move from, interesting problem to I'm willing to risk everything on this?
Hearing you use the mouthful of clinical grade fertility care, even I had to remind myself what that is. So a moment that everything changed. It's interesting. It didn't actually all change for me until a little while into the journey of building Béa. Obviously, one of the things that we do at Béa is we make babies. We help people make their babies. And we started the company in 2020. We closed our first round of funding sort of early 2021. Started to build the product, sort of brought in a team, raised more funding. It was sort of the venture go-go days. So we raised a lot of funding and scaled up quite a big team. And we're sort of building this medical device and this treatment experience. And on some level, I understood that it was real. And none of it quite hit home until one of our very first users, called us from the hospital because she'd conceived with her first Béa device and had an ectopic pregnancy and was in hospital having had emergency surgery to remove the fallopian tube.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, we'd actually already had reports of positive pregnancies from other users. And don't get me wrong, those were incredibly impactful moments. But this, I think, was the moment for me that it became so very real because we had someone who had a horrible experience and cared enough about what we were doing to call us from the hospital bed the day after her surgery and say to us, I want to try again there. I am going to try again with Béa.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought, my God, I think two things hit home for me in that moment was the gravity of the thing that we were doing. You just sort of I always used to say, oh, we're changing lives, we're changing people's lives. And it feels like such an airy fairy and a sort of like blithe thing to say. And of course, you're helping people conceive, their lives are changing. But in this moment, it had never felt more true to me that this woman, this brilliant, brilliant woman, ectopics are high risk, right? She had emergency surgery. She's down a fallopian tube. That impacts your fertility. And yet here she is saying, I'm going to try again. And I just thought, my goodness, we've really built something here.
Wow. That's what a way to start the podcast. That's did she keep in touch? Did she
did, and she conceived again safely. Her baby boy is
amazing.
He's going to be he's probably turning 1 this year, I think.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool, huh?
That is really cool. You're right. We do throw this kind of changing lives around. I've literally said it to people that work for me before in my profession. We are, what we do is changing lives and sort of. And I suppose you could say that about, most kind of things and services that are impactful. But yeah, you really are there, and that's, if you need a reason to come to work every morning. I can't think of many more. Yeah, it's a pretty good one. It's a
pretty good one. And it's interesting. Anytime I'm dealing with a really big fire, the universe gifts us a positive pregnancy report just to remind us that, like, you're doing the right thing.
Huge. Yeah. And it's, we often get caught in that moment of kind of like just before we started recording, you said you're putting out a tiny fire, and we're dealing with those day in, day out, all distractions from, but you step back, you think about the impact that you're having,
Mm-hmm.
And to everyone that's listening, you're having impact, whatever you're doing, whatever that moment you're in, think about trying to think about the bigger picture, and crikey, what a big picture you're having there. So, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So,
of course,
let's dive back to the beginning then, because your journey, really, your career, it started off marketing, if I'm correct, and research at an astrophysics laboratory, so bit of a stratospheric jump. So how did you find yourself, tell us about that journey from from marketing and research into devices and fertility, and kind of being a founder of a hardware company.
Yeah, it's I wanted to be an astrophysicist a very long time ago, and I'm one of those wonderful cases where my mathematical abilities were not quite up to my career ambitions. So I tried really hard, and then I went to business school. It's where some of us failed STEM people end up, I suppose. So that was sort of a very humbling moment that arrived fairly early on for me. So I went to the business school, and I sort of always said to myself, my dream early on was I wanted to have an office and a cubicle, and I wanted one of those little lanyard badges that clips to your belt that you pull out, tap in. The kind of all those things felt very cool to me, and
you see on TV.
I went totally, absolutely, and I sort of look back on it and laugh, right? But that felt very cool at the time, and I tried to apply to all of the consulting firms and got rejected roundly from every single one of them. So another sort of humbling experience that taught me that perhaps my future was not in a cubicle, but I didn't quite know where my future was. And that was when I created my first startup, actually.
Okay.
Sort of not in a typical arrangement, but went to work for a bigger media company that were trying to create a venture studio, and they funded a project that I brought to them that we were working on. And at the time, we built this incredible technology. I did not speak to a single user because I was too shy. So learned that lesson the hard way, and launched this amazing technology only to realize that A, it was a little bit ahead of its time, and B, most of the people who we'd built it for were like, that's really fun, but why do I need this? So, of course, humbled yet again, and that is when I made the jump into marketing. So I was offered the opportunity to start an ad agency as a part of a wider group. And I jumped on it, and I had the best time working with some
Mm-hmm.
phenomenally interesting companies, sort of really got deep into strategic branding, positioning, storytelling, sort of developed a bunch of skills that I think serve me now, although I'm sort
Mm-hmm.
of, jury's out. But had a really great time building that. But I really was kind of itching to build something. I'd always wanted to build something. And there were two things that I was like phenomenally passionate about. One was creating something that did some good in the world and specifically solved an inequity that felt arbitrary and
Mm-hmm.
unfair to me. And two, I was very driven to create a company where people would just love to come to work. The idea of creating something
Mm-hmm.
where people loved coming to work felt so powerful and so fun to me. And right around, I'd sort of been running the ad agency for a few years, went freelance, and then I met an embryologist who was talking to me
Mm-hmm.
about this idea. I never actually saw myself in fertility, honestly. It was not on my radar. Of course, you're in your 20s. Like, when is it ever? Um, for some people, it is. For me, it wasn't. And so I sort of met an embryologist. We were talking about the space and the technology. And I think two things happened. One is I really started to see with my own eyes the inequities that exist in
Mm-hmm.
fertility in particular, and how we've landed with a system that enables people with money to have babies, healthy babies,
Mm-hmm.
and people without money to just struggle alone and take chances. And that really like plucked at that. Well, hang on a second, that's not fair. Uh, Sort of desire. And then yeah, creating a company where I was able to build a team and start creating that sort of culture that, yeah, and it was the early days were really, really fun. Really hard, but really fun.
Yeah, because you started, well, according to LinkedIn at least, started in 2020. And you said you raised first fundraising in 21, I think you said earlier. So starting a business during a global pandemic, you know, how was that?
Yeah, I incorporated the company literally 3 days after we went into lockdown, I think.
Oh,
So we're a
wow.
real pandemic baby.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, to be honest, that first year was really principally just me trying to figure
Uh-huh.
out like, how do I grapple with what this idea is? What is the vision? What's
Uh-huh.
the potential? Is it actually feasible? What we're
Yeah.
actually talking about here, the core technology that we built was a medical device that allows someone to perform a clinical insemination procedure on themselves at home. And so if I were to put that into sort of clearer language, we need to create something that allows someone to reliably find their cervix themselves. I know a lot of medical students that can't find cervix. And so there was like a
Right.
real design challenge in the early days that
Yeah.
was like, wow, is it actually feasible? And then of course the pivotal question is, you need money to build regulated medical hardware. So can we raise
Yeah.
money for it? So the first sort of 12, 18 months of Béa, sort of 2020 into early 21, was a lot of grappling with like feasibility, building decks, trying to
Uh-huh.
pitch, trying to figure it out, and eating a lot of beans because, of course, you're not taking a check at that point because there's no money.
Uh-huh.
So the early days were a real grind, but we made it through, and yeah, here we
How
are
was
today.
that? How was that fundraising journey for you then? Because I know we met at the Fix, didn't we, last year in
We
at
did.
Howell campus, and one of the themes there, especially from the investors and the women entrepreneurs, was how the cards are definitely stacked against femtech and female engineers, because the majority of the investment landscape is dominated by middle-aged white men who are, you know, they get queasy at best over kind of even the mention of kind of women's parts. So
Vaginas.
the vagina, yeah. And there was a talk. One of the standout talks was basically the whole crowd just shouting vagina, and it was liberating, but it was, you
Yeah.
know, take the fun side out, there's a real problem. And, you're kind of raising funds as a very complicated kind of challenge problem to solve in a very complicated regulatory and funding landscape. How did you navigate that?
It's interesting. There's a real irony to the question, which is we're sort of often lumped in femtech as femtech.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the core function of the device that we've created, it is a sperm stick. Like it exists to solve for male factor infertility. Now, there are things around it that obviously solve for female factor infertility, timing ovulation, inseminations. All of these are really helpful things. But on broad strokes, the core purpose of this device is it's a male factor infertility solution.
Okay.
And so it always makes me laugh when we're branded a femtech company, because actually I say to my team, if we were men tech, we'd have raised a lot more money a lot more easily.
Yeah, well, surely with the marketing background, you could play it into that.
Well, and I should, right? But what's interesting is still today, women in heterosexual couples, women are the drivers of the buying decisions and timelines and pathways, and a lot of the labor that happens in an infertility context is labor is probably not quite the right word, but a lot of the work that happens in infertility is on women. And so we brand ourselves to be bought by and appeal to women.
I remember you saying it because it's funny actually when you mentioned that when you started your first business, you were so shy and you wouldn't speak to the customers, and yet our first interaction was you were on stage talking about
how times have changed.
Yeah, and I think I remember you saying it was the end user is the male, or it's a male problem, but it's the women that have to empower. It's them that you need to get on board to push it, because leave men to their own devices and we ain't doing anything. We're putting our head in the sand, because it's
absolutely.
it's demasculating, isn't it, to admit that you kind of have a problem down there.
It is, and it's a real shame that it is, right? Because the more shame there is on the male side, the more that, like on the female side, they sort of pick up and do the work that the shame is preventing the male side from sort of sitting with, grappling with, and engaging with. And what was always really interesting to me at Béa is, obviously not everyone gets pregnant with our technology. That's just the name of the game, right? IVF is not a sure bet either.
Yeah.
But we would sometimes get complaints into customer support. And obviously you give someone a support email address and they think that anything they say is, not going to be read by a human. But of course the entire team would read all of these, and we feel it in our bones. And pretty consistently, some of the worst emails we ever got were from the male partner, the husband.
Really?
And look, I have so much compassion for it. They're frustrated. It's not working. They don't know what to do. They see their partner going to the ends of the earth and experiencing this emotional stress and trauma, and they feel powerless. And the moment where they're not powerless is when they get to complain to someone and yell at someone. And boy, do they come out swinging. And it was always so predictable and so painful. And, of course, we have so much compassion for it. But it was... a really interesting thing that I learned along the way. I didn't think we'd have to grapple with that, but we did.
Let me interrupt for 30 seconds with something most hardware founders learn the hard way. The skills that get you from prototype to product are not the same skills that get you from product to scale. That transition is where leadership matters. At Kodu, we help physical product companies hire senior leaders who can formalize roadmaps, build world-class teams, and align product with commercial strategy. Director, VP, C-suite. If you are entering a new category, raising capital, or professionalizing your product function, this is not a hire to rush. So find me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn, and let's talk before you make the call. There's so many layers to dig into, isn't there? From a psychological level, it's it's horrible but fascinating at the same time.
Totally.
And imagine when you kind of embarked on this, you would have been naive to kind of these coming down the line, and but Wow. What a, it's super interesting. So
Yeah.
we've kind of skipped around a little bit because I do this when there's a really interesting topic we can dive into. I kind of go off script.
Love
but
going off script.
but really interesting because there was I sat in a few of the at the fix. I sat in a few of the kind of the side sessions and around branding and marketing and some of the guerrilla marketing as well around kind of speaking to men and almost adding humor to I can't remember the one that was the name of the brand, but it was to do with fertility as well. But you know, is there any how are you tackling that? You know, in terms of that, you know, the shame and kind of maybe
Yeah.
de-shaming it, you know, or kind of helping the men out.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I think there's I adjust humor a little bit depending on the stakeholder.
Yeah,
So when I'm talking to investors, I actually quite like to weave a lot of humor in. I, drop in
yeah.
the word vagina. If I want to go on level hard, I'll sometimes use the word vulva, like sperm, penis, erectile dysfunction, like all of this is like the natural language of what we do. And I think
Yeah.
kind of bringing it in with a little bit of levity, play with it feels like the wrong set of words to use as I'm having like this line of logic. But it's not, it doesn't have to be serious, right?
Yeah.
You can leave a little bit of room for someone to kind of raise their eyebrows and then just like handle that with levity and move on. I think the stakeholders where I'm careful is our users. Obviously people who are experiencing infertility. Chris, I would not wish that on anyone. It is the worst. And so grappling with it a little bit myself, it truly is just one of the worst experiences. You decide that you would like to conceive, and then you can't. And the medical system says, well, go home and try harder. And the NICE guideline says, have sex every 2 to 3 days for 12 to 24 months. Imagine being told to go and have sex. Now,
Yeah.
for many people that, music to my ears, how great, wonderful, yay. But it's just not practical advice. And I don't know anyone in my circles who is like, absolutely, I'd happily have sex every 2 days for 24 months. Why not? That it just doesn't fit with life sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? And
Kind of takes
so
the romance out of it and the shine if it's just a
100%,
to-do list.
100%. It's a thing that you just have to get done. And
Yeah.
so it tears people apart. And so one of the ways, I think we have a very specific tone of voice with users. And this is where I think as a founder, you have to be careful that it's not, in the early days, it obviously is your voice, right? It kind of has to be while you're shaping it, but in time, it has to become the brand voice. But really
Yeah.
to hold people with compassion and really hear them and hold them in moments where they're just so vulnerable. And then in moments where, you're either going to laugh or cry, right? Sometimes people just need to cry and they just need to be held and witnessed and I think we do a really good job of that. And sometimes they just kind of also need to laugh because there's nothing else you can do. And I think we do a great job of that. We play with it. I write a bulletin every 2 weeks and goodness, the topics, we've covered with great hilarity. We covered the trend of scrotal cooling. That was honestly, we've never had a better time with puns ever than writing that one. And the medical device we've created is obviously it looks big, right? And it kind of looks intimidating. And one of the main questions we get is like, oh my goodness, but how big is it really? Is it really going to hurt? Like, where does it go? And so we had a really good time with that. I think we, compared it to one of those sort of brooding characters in a romance novel and he's sort of really played with it. And I think sometimes that tone of voice and to come back to it, that kind of marketing and we are dealing with a space that is shame laden and it's full of taboo and I think just understanding when to use levity to just lighten it. Things are so heavy when you're on this journey and I think learning how to build that voice and do that has been a really powerful journey.
Yeah, amazing. Because I imagine that all your years in marketing and venture building, you're not approaching anything as complex as this when it, all the different emotions and, but fascinating. So, going back to the investors side, when early days, what did kind of investors push back on hardest in those early days? What were some of the challenges you had to overcome other than what we've already talked about, I guess?
Gosh, I mean, what didn't they push back on? I'll be honest. In the early days, one of the things I got most was, hang on a second. You're not a clinician. You're not infertile. You've never built hardware before. Like, why on earth are you the person to make this happen? Also, you're a female founder, and 2% of VC dollars go to female founded companies. So, you're fighting for a smaller pool of capital to begin with, right? And then in that pool of capital, everyone's like, wait, hang on. And they're trying to do the math on the percentage chance that this is ever going to become anything at all. And so, of course, it's probably going to come as no surprise that to close my very first round of funding, I ended up speaking to something like 283 investors. And I think I closed 15 of them. And, of course, I was pretty naive at the time. I'm sort of a little bit more battle hardened now, I suppose. But you sort of raised 500K. And with this 500K, I thought, my goodness, we're going to build the product and get through regs and get it to market and start generating some. It's all going to happen. Of course, that 500K lasted 5 seconds. We had to go back out and raise again. But I think certainly the pushback in the early days was, who the hell are you to think that you're going to create this? And I remember, I had a co-founder, a male co-founder, and I remember I was in a call with an investor once, and it kind of didn't hit home that there was any kind of structural issue at all until this call, when he was being asked what his vision for the company was. And I was being asked how I would manage family and flight schedules between here and the US when it came time to launch in the US market. I was like, wow, shouldn't I get, I'm driving this whole thing. I'm the one, right? Shouldn't I get asked what my vision is for the company? So I came out of that call and I really sat with that. And I thought, my goodness, well, that doesn't seem right. So there was a lot of pushback in the early days, and sheer force of will. Even to this day, I think a sheer force of will. We're still coasting on sheer force of will that we exist as a company, because raising capital hasn't been easy. But why you? Why this? Why this technology? Oh, well, this company in the market failed. Why won't you fail? You're going to fail like them. What's different? There's all of this pushback happens all of the time, and I think the core theme of everything that has come through is probably we'll find a way, because we always have. I now have a 5-year track record of biting tooth and nail so that this thing is going to become a thing, right? Going gray. I now have a chronic health condition as a result of stress that I'm not the only founder that has one of those, right? And I'm kind of laughing as I say it. When I discovered this, it was obviously wildly painful to grapple with. It's sort of health issues that ironically impact fertility, actually. So for me, there's sort of this.
You've got an answer now.
Exactly. It's a universe. It's sort of a enormous fuck you moment. But to be honest, I turned it around into well, actually, hang on a second. I've given so much up for this. I'm not going to quit now. Absolutely not.
Yeah, fair play.
And so, we're kind of rolling in the US. Our first pregnancy reports are starting to come through from users in the US, and that's been really rewarding as well. But I think investor pushback continues to be one of the dominating themes of Béa, which means essentially the dominating themes of my life. And it's very much, why will this succeed when all that has come before has not?
I mean, you've got, like you say, you've got 5 years plus of data now of pregnancies, of successful births, and that in itself is fantastic. It's awesome. Do you know how many successful births that there have been?
So births are kind of hard to track because obviously it's quite downstream of when we play a part in the whole proceeding. But I think in the UK that we know of, probably in the hundreds.
That's incredible.
We've got, those that actually come back 9 months later and tell us and send photographs. Like that's obviously far fewer, but it's incredible when they do. It's
That's
incredible when they do.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just need to show the investors that I'm sure you've got a wall of baby photos. That's the yeah,
Yeah, and it's remarkable how that doesn't move the needle at all,
really.
actually. I really thought a wall of baby photos in a deck,
Yeah,
people would go, my goodness, this is investable. Like, this is changing lives. This is actually doing
yeah.
something. And they're all like, yeah, but what are your unit economics? Like, what's the scale potential? Is this going to really be $1 billion business? And look, I get it from an investment perspective. They're looking for $1 billion exit. Babies are no. Um, but it's curious how that makes no difference at all.
Yeah. We need a bit more soul and compassion in the investment scene. Perhaps,
I'll let you fight that battle, Chris. I have enough of my.
bring it on.
You take that one.
I'm interested to know, obviously you talked about an experience that I have heard, quite a lot from female founders, that kind of almost push to the side and speak to the male in the team, that kind of, it's shocking that that's happening, in today's scene. But what did you take from that? Did you go into, future pitches and are you pushing back on that now? Is that lit a fire underneath you?
It's a great question. It hasn't so much lit a fire, it's created a lot of frustration. I'll
Yeah.
definitely say that. Lighting a fire, no. I think for me, when I'm at my lowest with it, I'm at my most cynical. I'm really like
Uh-huh.
hating the world because I've just come out of a pitch where had I been male, we'd have killed it.
Yeah.
Um, I think it does ignite a certain cynicism, and I suppose the satisfaction I get out of that is like hard is a feature, not a bug of
Uh-huh.
Béa. Like this turns the dial up on that a little bit. And so if I can circumvent that, if I can get better, if I can come through that, I have managed to acquire a skill, a resilience.
Uh-huh.
There will be advantage in this for me at some point in the future. You can't do your entire career on level 10 difficulty and not come out of it better at your job.
You're gonna be awesome.
Well, I hope so. I like work in progress, TBD. But I think sort of directionally, I think I take satisfaction from knowing that it isn't easy and hasn't been easy and probably will not be easy long into the
Uh-huh.
future, because that just makes me better at my job and better at what I do. And I think especially as we're all grappling with AI and what that means for jobs
Uh-huh.
and like where do I fit in the workplace, etc. I sort of take a little bit of comfort from that, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that's sort of one of the things I take from it. I also think I try so hard to either resist the label of female founder or
Uh-huh.
shine a spotlight on how ridiculous it is by calling men male founders. Like
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
call them male founders, we call them founders, and yet we call them female founders. And in some regard,
Uh-huh.
that label is very helpful, right? There are funds that exist for female founders. There are pathways,
Uh-huh.
there's specific initiatives that exist for female founders. And so in many ways, that label is really useful, whilst the grassroots system doesn't exist
Uh-huh.
it's sort of an equal measure for both male and female. I think that is a useful label, but I really look forward to a time when we don't like have male and female founders and female founders needing a leg up. We have founders.
Yeah. Absolutely. You are right. It is ridiculous, but I think it's also because it's not the perceived norm, is it? And I think, in fact, I see it as a positive thing. We need more women in design, in engineering, in product, and we definitely at the leadership level. Where do they all
Right.
go?
Oh, and it changes everything. Well, like here's a
Yeah.
story for you. And we were designing the device, and we were trying to create the instructions for use. So obviously we put
Uh-huh.
sort of a lot of iconography and sort of graphics
Uh-huh.
through the instructions for use to help people understand how to use the device. And we worked with some art workers, some sort of illustrators to do the illustration. And people just were not quite understanding. We would do a version of the instructions for use. We'd go into a
Uh-huh.
usability test and people were like, okay, but how do I insert it into my body? And and you know, usability study number 15,001. Like we really were trying to figure this out and crack this because it's pivotal. And I remember we switched Illustrator, and this Illustrator flipped the diagram so that it was self-insertion. So actually, she drew the diagram from the perspective of the person doing the inserting. And suddenly, everyone in every usability study knew how to use the device. Now, the difference was this illustrator was female. The two from the prior runs were male. So they've never inserted anything into their own vagina before because, of course, they don't have a vagina. And so when they lack the lived experience, they simply cannot put themselves in that person's shoes to design for that body. And I know that the job of a good designer is to, not lean on lived experience and to be able to design for everybody. I know that that is supposed to be true, but we were working with very good people. And it took a woman to design those instructions for use to make them understandable for the women who were putting this in their bodies.
Yeah, it's you shouldn't be designing from lived experience, but actually in this application and many more kind of, I know you don't like the term femtech, but products marketed and used by women, actually you need that. So I had a comment on LinkedIn actually a few weeks ago about because I'm sponsoring Women's Health Week in New York, and the comments there about kind of how wrong it feels that so many products aimed at women, in women's health and femtech, are still designed by middle-aged white blokes. It's but that's just the
And a lot of them
reality
were
of
designed for men, right? Pink it and shrink it, and women will buy it. It just actually isn't the case.
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to a talk I went to in New York last year, actually at the DMI, and it was about data. It's a lot more interesting than the title suggests, but about how regulation around product design, in a lot of spaces hasn't been updated for many decades. So there's one case where the guy called Barnaby was doing the talk, but he was saying about how seatbelt regulations are going off topic here, but seatbelt regulations hadn't been updated in the US since like the 1950s or 60s, and they were based on the a middle-aged bloke of average height, which at the time was like less than 6 foot. It was, but obviously still a lot taller than a woman. So those safety standards haven't been updated, and they wonder why women are much more likely to die in a car crash. They're something like 5 times more likely to die in a car crash than a bloke.
Spot on. Even like pharmaceutical trials where women weren't included, they would just adjust the dose down for women. There's so much that we don't know about cardiology and heart health and heart attacks in women, right? It's largely perceived to be one of the biggest killers of men, but it's mostly because we just don't understand it. There haven't been enough studies on sort of cardiac issues in women. There's this wonderful book. It's called Invisible Women. And it is in here in this book that the author sort of talks about the seat belts, etc. All of these things that we encounter in day-to-day life that actually you don't realize we're built for men and shrunk for women. But actually, the male and the female body, and I appreciate we're using sort of very gendered terms here in terms of men, women, etc. But the male body and the female body are actually completely different. Different hormone cycles, different needs, different this. It's just simply completely insufficient to take innovation that was created around men and just shrink it proportionate to body size. And I'm so glad that we live in a world where, at a minimum, we're starting to recognize it, if not fully designed for it.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more appreciated now, but is the funding there to enable us to actually do something about it? That's the desire and the ability to execute it.
I think it may. It's interesting. I'm beginning to feel a little bit of a shift, and this could also just be venture funding like went down the toilet for a good chunky little period there in
Yeah.
22, 3, 4-ish, starting to come out of it, maybe not quite. It's a bit of a will it, won't it situation. But I think just this year, women's health has been really highlighted as not just an area that we must invest in because we must, and we must do good, but an area where there's an enormous amount of opportunity to make money here. And if you're not invested in women's health, like, you're going to miss out. And I think there's starting to be institutional recognition of that from a venture and an investment side. And I hope that that starts to drive behavior and change in funding for these issues.
I genuinely hope so. I think, but I think I'm definitely hearing that across industry as well. It definitely feels a lot more optimistic now, and funding is still hard to get, obviously, but it's there's a little bit more available today than there was last year, and certainly in the year or two
Certainly the year before.
Yeah, and you know, you can empathize with the investors to a certain degree. You know, they put a lot of money into businesses pre-COVID, and then they were very patient, and then, you know, they're not there to make friends, are they? Let's face it, they're there to make a return on their investment. So it's been a harder environment, but certainly feels a lot more optimistic all around this year. So
I think so.
before we dive back in, this one is for founders and CEOs building physical products. If you are thinking about hiring a VP of product, chief product officer, or head of R&D, this is not just another hire. It defines how your roadmap is set, how your teams are built, and how your company competes. At Kodu, we specialize in securing senior product and engineering leaders for hardware businesses entering their next stage of growth. Focused, discreet, high consequence. If that decision is on your horizon, find me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn, and let's talk it through. Well, tell us, for obviously we've talked about Béa and, you know, and the product and what we're building. Kind of, we've talked around it, but, you know, for anyone that hasn't heard of Béa, you know, perhaps you could give us an insight into the team, what you're building, you know, what it's like to work, you know, at Béa today.
At Béa, circling back to what we are, clinical grade fertility care. Just the intro there made me think, we need to figure out how to describe what we do in a way that's like a little less dry. So Béa, the product, I would say that there's sort of two parts of the product. There's the medical device that we've created, which essentially actually just takes an old fertility treatment that used to be the de facto fertility treatment before IVF was commercialized. You know, if you're my age, I suppose you're our mothers and grandmothers. This would have been what they received when they went to the doctor if they were struggling to conceive. It's called intercervical insemination. Now, when IVF was commercialized, this treatment sort of fell by the wayside. All we did really was go back and look at it and go, this looks simple enough that people should be able to do it for themselves at home. Why did it go away? As it turns out, it went away because it doesn't make the clinic any money, and fertility has been privatized and is therefore the incentives are in the direction of making money. And so sort of one part of the product is that medical device, that old fertility treatment reinvented as a home insemination device. The other part of the product, that a little bit more nascent, but is very much around care. It's not just, you can't just give someone a stick and say, hey, good luck. Like, what they're really looking for is to be held and to be told what to do. And I think, Chris, we talked a little bit about this at the Fix, but this concept of knowledge, influence, and control. How do we create a sense of ownership in people who are trying to conceive? Because boy, do they not feel that, right? You know, and knowledge is, I know what to do. Influence is, I have permission to do it. You know, this shows up a lot in the NHS where there's gatekeeping. You know, sure, you might need treatment, but you got to go home and have sex for 2 years before you're eligible. So influence is I can do the thing that I know to do. And then control is I can do it. Not permission per se, but I actually I am empowered to go and do the thing. And so the medical device was really created to do the permission and the control piece. Here's a device that's over the counter. You have permission. There's no gatekeeping. And you can use it for yourself. We can quite literally put it in your hands. That leaves us lacking a little bit in the knowledge. Like, I know what to do. Like, how do I know what to do? And really what this comes through as is care. And so the other half of the product that we're currently building is essentially clinical care, but delivered in a very empowering way in a way that kind of meets the user where they are. So
Uh-huh.
often when you're struggling to conceive, the pathway will be sex to IVF.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, whoa, like what happened to the in-between stages? Like it's mad. It's like a hell of a transition. And so what we're trying to do is create that in between. And so Béa, when we talk about clinical grade care, what we're really talking about is the missing care pathway in between DIY and IVF. And that's what
Uh-huh.
we're building. And that can involve clinical care and consultations, insemination through a medical device, lab work, diagnostics, prescription meds, etc. So we're really building integrated end-to-end care that stitches together all of these pieces and most importantly, holds the user through that journey so they never for a second feel like they're lost,
Uh-huh.
alone, out of control, etc.
Amazing. It's a full ecosystem, full journey that you're kind of taking
Exactly
or
right.
going on with them. So
Exactly
wonderful.
right. And, you asked what it's like to work here. I
Yeah.
kind of like to think it's quite fun.
Yeah.
We have a great time. We we're actually a fully remote team, and
Okay.
I caught a lot of flack for that from investors early on.
Uh-huh.
You should be in office, you'll move faster, etc. I think there's a way to approach it in a sort of hybrid way that uh, brings you all of the advantages of flexibility and all of the advantages of real, like, kind of knitted in teamwork. And so that's one of the
Mm.
things that we really believe at our core is it can be done
It's a real
remote.
big test of trust, isn't it? But my team are remote, so I'm looking forward to getting someone that's relatively close to me that we can get together.
Yeah.
Every couple of weeks or so. But really, I don't want to hire people, you know, and have them sit in an office just because that's what we do.
Right.
It's I want them to be in office because they enjoy being around the team or it's useful. I think ultimately I want to hire people that I trust to deliver. And it sounds like
Right.
exactly the same. So what does the team look like today then in terms of, size and makeup? And are you augmenting that with, freelancers or kind of consultancies?
Yeah, we're a pretty lean team, I'll be
Yeah,
honest. Sort of count on one hand the number of people driving Bayer right now, which is pretty cool,
that
actually.
is cool. Yeah.
Um, we're doing a lot of leveraging AI tools to try to figure out how to make
Yeah.
sure that we're as efficient as we can be. And then obviously we work with a lot of contractors and
Yeah.
freelancers to support us and pull in what we need as and when we need it. And
Uh-huh.
the reason that that strategy works for us right now is we're sort of on the precipice of scaling in the US, but we haven't quite
Yeah.
yet figured out what that scale looks like. And so
Uh-huh.
I don't know what the team needs to look like. And
Yeah.
so we're sort of just feeling out those US sort of go to market strategies and where
Uh-huh.
we're feeling traction. And as soon as I know like what the shape of the business will take, we'll absolutely hire the team to drive that. And right now the setup is actually working pretty well.
Yeah, keep it lean, keep it kind of the core team close, and then augment it with experts. That you can
Exactly right.
dial up or dial down depending on not just funding, but kind of where you're at in terms of the project cycle.
Exactly
Um,
right.
I think a lot of founders make the mistake of oh we've just got some money, let's go out and hire, and they hire before they realize what they actually need and you know and
Oh,
when.
absolutely. And,
So
people listening probably can't see it. I am nodding vigorously because I myself have made that mistake
okay.
embarrassingly more than once. You suddenly have a bank account full of money and you think, oh my goodness, we need people. Actually, you don't always. You don't always. And it was a really important and hard lesson to learn, I'll tell you that much.
What have been some of the other hard to learn lessons that kind of that really drive you today? Then,
Oh my goodness. Hard to learn lessons. One of the hardest, I think, the first time I had to let someone go tore a little piece of my soul off. I
uh,
really, they always used to say in startups, hire slow, fire fast. And there's all of these little
yeah,
heuristics and maxims and sort of rules that,
yeah,
that, that we all hear parroted all the time. And then you live it yourself and you think, oh my God,
uh-huh,
um, it's different to live something than to just read in a book. So I think learning how to do that with integrity and compassion was a really
uh-huh,
hell of a journey. Um, it's really a forcing function for you thinking about like what comes first, right? The human or the company, and you've got to put the company first. But boy, does it feel hard sometimes. So, like
Yeah.
sort of learning how to do that gracefully was a big one for me. Yeah, I think learning how to handle rejection. I drink from what I call the rejection firehose on a daily basis. You know, you're trying to raise money and everyone's saying no. So I think learning that that is not about you. I mean, honestly, in some cases, it genuinely actually has been about me. And I always take that a little harder. But I think dealing with that rejection and getting up and going to work in the morning, and you know, we're lucky, right? I get to look at a wall of babies and I remind myself why I'm doing it. But certainly dealing with rejection and having it, you know, knowing it's not personal was another sort of hard one for me to learn. And I think also, you know, sometimes when you're leading something, they always talk about how being a CEO is pretty lonely. And I always used to think, oh, it doesn't have to be. And actually, sometimes it kind of is. You know, you have the full context of the business. You know what's in the bank. You know what you're spending. You know how much time you have. You know whether or not you're going to close that round or not. And you're the only one who can make it happen. Really. I mean, look, you have a team around you, and they are the reason that I am able to make anything happen at all. But there's sort of a lesson there, I think, in learning to hold yourself a little bit and sit with that loneliness and be okay with it.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I mean, I've got a wonderful partner, and I've got kind of good friends around me, both, you know, personal friends, but also in the industry, you know, that a nice kind of people to just balance those emotions as well. When you've had a hard day, you've had rejection, or, you know, because we all take things to heart, don't we? Even though, you know, it's the business, not me, you know, but having someone to ground you, go, you know, just take a step back and look at what you've done so far. You know, that one rejection, that one, you know, person that said no or kind of disagreed with you. You know, tomorrow's a new day. You know, that if they want to hold that against you, you know, let them.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to be zen in the moment, but you know, when you step back and go, yeah, they are right. You know, it's their loss. But are there any you know, aside from the obvious kind of vices, are there any coping strategies or systems, you know, that help you kind of go through those kind of challenging CEO moments?
Let me try to surface the healthier coping mechanisms, because obviously we all have ones that aren't. Seriously though, I have a very, very good girlfriend who, when I was raising my very first funding round, it was so frustrating. And of course I'd never raised funding before. So I was like, what the hell is this? And I was so dejected. It was not coming together. I had no idea what the hell was going on. And I called her and I was like, hey, I'm coming over. She lived like 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
And I just remember as I was walking down the street, her front door opened and this like hand came out with a glass of wine in it. I was like, ah. And I think, you know, one of the coping mechanisms, I suppose the lesson from that is not wine, although of course sometimes that helps, but friendship.
Yeah.
And just having people that you can talk to who are not in the business, who remind you that you will exist if your business doesn't. And that really took some time for me. I think, especially in the early days, you kind of mesh your identity with your company. And so the thought of the company not existing felt existential. And good friends who remind you that it's not existential. Like you'll exist beyond Béa. It will be okay in those early moments where there's a high degree of possibility that you'll fail. But it sort of feels really important. And I have the most incredibly supportive partner. And that's, you know, also certainly been very helpful.
It's, yeah, they say running a business is lonely, but it's even more lonely if you haven't got a supportive partner. It's, yeah, they are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, partner, friend, coach,
Yeah.
just human who human who can witness you going through this journey, who tells you that you'll be okay. Like whatever your relationship to him, it's so important.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned the US. That's obviously that's the new territory for you. How's that journey going so far? Are you you getting out there much? Are you there now?
I'm there now. I'm in New York.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so I spend most of my time in New York now.
Yeah,
Sort of also been a bit of a journey, and when do you jump ship? What time? Is
yeah.
it too early? When do you move? Can you move, etc.? So kind of grappled with a lot of those things for a good amount of time. I'm here now, and it honestly is going well. Like, we had our first few pregnancies. We're, from a revenue perspective, like outperforming forecast by nearly
Amazing.
100% so far, and we're sort
Wow.
of pretty early in terms of being on the market. So
Uh-huh.
really finding that the opportunity that exists in the US, both from a market size perspective, but also from a system level integration
Uh-huh.
perspective, it is just fundamentally a bigger market with bigger routes to
Yeah.
market, more optionality in terms of partnership, distribution channel,
Uh-huh.
integration into the system, etc. And so there's a real sort of sense of abundance here that has
Yeah.
been so powerful, and created a real. It's just been fun. Like, I feel like
Uh-huh.
finally there are tailwinds, and that's been really powerful for us and for the team.
I imagine the insurance based healthcare model in the States actually is a lot easier to navigate than trying to cooperate with the NHS here.
Yes and no, there are
Yeah.
different challenges. I think certainly in the NHS, the biggest challenge is scarcity and
Uh-huh.
gatekeeping. There's just not enough funding for IVF. And
Yeah.
so there's gatekeeping and navigating that. And, of course, it changes depending on where you live, right? You live in North
Uh-huh.
London, you can get 3 cycles of IVF. You live somewhere else, good luck. Like,
Uh-huh.
you're getting shit. And I think it's a different challenge in the US with insurance. Insurance is complicated. You know, especially in fertility, what they're really trying to do is make sure that it's not a free for all. So you have to prove that you've been having sex for 6 to 12 months, and then maybe we'll refer you for investigations. Well, how do you prove you're having sex? Right? And heterosexual couples can go to their physician and say, we've been having
Uh-huh.
sex for a year. What are your donor sperm users saying? What are your
Uh-huh.
same-sex female couples saying? Right? Like, how do you prove you've inseminated 6 to 12 months in a
Yeah.
row? So I think there are challenges, these challenges exist in the UK as in the
Uh-huh.
US, but just because there's insurance does not for a second mean that it's covered. The average
Uh-huh.
out-of-pocket spend on fertility in 2019 in the US was $63,000 per couple to get to a
Wow.
live birth. That was 2019. Yeah, six
Uh,
6 years ago, right? And we've had a
yeah.
pandemic and rising costs
Yeah.
since then. So the it's complicated, and
Uh-huh.
it's as a result, there's so much more opportunity to really integrate into that system, right? The
Uh-huh.
go-to-market optionality that exists here is pretty cool. But it's complex to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's the opportunity there is huge, but like I say, getting money out of the insurers, that's kind of exactly why they exist, is to not spend money.
I was
What's their MO?
about to say, yeah, a challenge not unique to
Yeah.
fertility. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, we're coming to the end of the session, Tess. But let's talk about what's coming up. What the next kind of couple of years look like for you and for Béa. What are you most excited about? Kind of that's coming up.
Gosh, I mean, one of the things I'm super excited about, certainly in the short term, is we're launching a partnership with the sperm bank soon to support better guided home insemination pathways. And that is
Amazing.
something that is just so incredibly dear to my heart. So I'm excited to see that roll out. I think for me, the next few years, I'm just like filled with so much excitement about what it holds for us. I think we're probably going to experience significant growth, and that's exciting, right? Like, the challenges that
Uh-huh.
come with scaling are so the problems go from how do I keep this business alive to
Uh-huh.
how do I optimize and build a viable and profitable, kind of a different type of challenge, and
Uh-huh.
and so much, to me anyway, so much more interesting to try to solve those problems. And so I'm mostly really excited to experience a little bit that shift in problem set that comes
Uh-huh.
with finally getting product market fit and beginning to scale in a sizable market. So that feels really exciting to me. Alongside all of the other things, we're onboarding sort of new ambassadors closing around, and they're already, they've been a great fit. They're being very helpful. So sort of
Amazing.
excited to see where those relationships go. And of course, you never know what the future holds, but I think there's a lot to play for here and a lot that we
Hmm.
can build. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you just to round this off. So just say the first thing that comes to mind with these. So,
Oh, gosh. Okay.
right, number one, one thing that founders overcomplicate.
The first thing that I was going to say is legal, but actually legal's very important. So I don't think we always overcomplicate. That's quite an incriminating answer.
Don't scrimp on legal.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
Especially in the US. That's
Oh my God, tell me
sure.
about it.
A value you'll never compromise on. That's probably easier
Integrity.
to answer. Integrity. Wonderful. The best advice you ignored at the time.
Make decisions. It's your only job. Make them and make them
Yeah.
fast.
Awesome. A mistake you think more founders need to make.
Scaling a team too quickly and then needing to learn how to let people go and live with that.
Yeah. I think until you've had to let someone go or you've made a bad hire, it can just seem too easy.
Spot on. It's a hard lesson, but it's an important lesson in humanity, I think.
Absolutely. And an important lesson in how to hire as well, how to slow down the process without slowing down really is,
Absolutely.
but adding more rigor to it. What do you look for first when hiring leaders? This might not necessarily apply to Béa, but in general.
Attitude.
Attitude, yeah. Positive or negative?
I think, yeah, ideally a positive one. Sorry, that came out with attitude. That was not meant to be a shitty attitude. I think someone's attitude matters a lot more than their experience for a startup where we need to be humble, wear a lot of hats, and be open to learning.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of your answers so far. Something hardware taught you that software never could.
You can never predict what a human is going to do with it. And let me tell you, I cannot. We don't have time to go into all of the things that people did with this thing that is supposed to go in a vagina. Whereas, how? That is what hardware taught me.
Yeah, one common thread that you'll find when you speak to any hardware founder or leader is that the testing really doesn't start until the customer's got it in their hands.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, and yours to the extreme. Wonderful. Well, there's the cat again. Thank you for going through that. So, in terms of how people can learn more about Béa, how they can get in touch with you, what's the best channel or kind of media for them to reach out to you?
BéaFertility.com. Our DMs are always open if sliding into a DM is still an appropriate thing to do in a corporate setting, hopefully. Say hi there. We're always monitoring that inbox. I can always be reached at Tess at BéaFertility.com. My inbox is also open. So
Awesome.
Pretty easy to find me.
We'll drop the links in the show notes, and obviously we're promoting this. And then finally, are you heading out to Women's Health Week? You're in New York, so it's just around the corner.
I am, and I'm so excited for it.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you there. But Tess, wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's one of the highlights of my day. So thank you so
such a treat
much.
to be here. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.